So today we will talk about the details which goes inside the 276 and 277 transaction. Again, this is the request and the response about the healthcare claim status. Now, we have talked about so much 835, 837 because these are the transactions which are more, I would say, frequent transactions. Similarly, your 276, 277 is also a very frequent transaction. Reason why? Because every time they submit the claim, they want to know if there is any delay, what is the status of the claim, and they, meaning the provider world, want to know for the claim what they submitted, what is happening on that. Now, this is the document which is more relevant to the 5010 as we see here. This is the 5010 document. You can find different sort of documents while just Google, but only thing you need to take care of is you need to be very specific about what kind of an information you are looking for. Most of the time you will be able to find the information, but there are chances you will not find anything because of the PHI or any HIPAA related reason. You may not find the appropriate information. Now, moving on, this is one of the healthcare 276, 277 transaction document. I just pulled it. Again, this is just the document disclosure and all those information. So let's jump on more towards where exactly you are going to see the more information about the transaction set. Now see here, let's understand a little bit about the companion guide on a brief as well. The companion guide explains the procedure and the requirements necessary for trading partners of health partner, because this document belongs to health partner plans and their companion guide. This is their companion guide. What it means that they have taken the implementation guide and created their own set of parameters and the procedure by inheriting the requirements from the implementation guide. That is why this is the companion guide, and this is very specific to HPP, which is Health Partner Plan. Now, this document is going to talk about 276 and 277 transaction, which is the transaction used for the healthcare status and the response of that status. Most of the time you will find this is happening with the help of provider portal. What do you mean by provider portal? Provider portal is the system which is set up by the plan, which is set up by the payer, where the provider take the access and try to get the status of all their claims online. So there is a very popular product which is called Navinet, which is moving up in the market, where the providers are easily set up by the payer and the provider can easily go online and look the status of their claims. So all the transactions which are being submitted, all the transactions which is in pending, and what are the transactions which are finalized, there is a way they can go online and they can look through those informations. So that is what is happening at this point of time. Now, read through this. The companion guide is intended to cover information that is within the framework of ASC Acts 12 implementation guide adopted for sure under HIPAA. So that's what it confirms, that this document have taken a base as a implementation guide, and that considering that document as a base, this is being created. Now, transmissions based on this companion guide used in tandem with Acts 12 implementation guide are compliant with Acts 12 syntax, those guides and HIPAA. So the base completely coming from the implementation guide. The only thing is some changes are made considering that what additional values will be needed for the health partner plans. Now, this is non-disclosure and other information to make more enforced document. Now let's look at it. This is a very good information for anyone to understand how the things are working on the 276 and the 277. Very important. Looking through the claim status request and response. The claim status request is 276. That is the request being made by the provider to find out the information. The purpose of generation at 276 is to obtain the current status of the claim within the adjudication process. That means it doesn't say after the adjudication process. Within the adjudication process means where exactly the claim is, what is the as of status. Now, what are the minimum information required to know that particular information? Now, this is companion guide, and the partner plan is asking that if you as a provider looking for some specific claim status, you need to provide us what? Member ID, provider ID, member name and date of birth, and the gender. So if you provide this piece of information, you will be able to find out what is the status of the claim. Now, let's move on. Now, this is the sample screen they have provided. WebMD is a software. WebMD is the software which can help to locate the particular information related to the claim status. Now, what does it say? See, this software can be customized. Talking about customization, this software is getting used more on the provider side. That means your hospital or your billing office or your physician office is using this particular software, which is WebMD, very popular EMR EHR software in the market. What it says, this particular software is trying to inquire about the claim state, but before it does, what they want to select. So let's say I am a person who is working at the doctor office, physician office, and I need to look through this piece of information to find out the claim status. First thing I need to find out is for which payer I am trying to. If it is Aetna, I will select Aetna here. If it is Health Partner PA, I'll select Health Partner PA. So for that, first I need to, and then the required information is member ID, last name. For this software, these are the minimum information required, but for Health Partner plan, they just require, see, any additional information being sent out is good, but minimum they require these 4-5 pieces of information to get that information. Now what it says, if no service date is supplied, then only claims from the previous 90 days will be returned. You have to have a cutoff that, okay, how big a data set you want, how big the date range should be. So depending upon the customization, let's say if you don't have the service date, you don't know what was the date of service for which you are looking for the claim, then the system will automatically give you the return, the result set, which is the response of 276. The response is 277. So you are getting the 90 days of worth data. That means the 90 days, whatever claims are part of that 90 days, you will get it. But if you know the specific dates about the service date, you can enter it, and this will give you the specific service date. Now move on. So that is how, now at least you understood that how exactly it will work in a real-time work from the physician side. Now let's talk about the data elements which are part of 276 transaction, 276 request. These are the very frequent request and the response transactions. The reason being is because these things are really used on a regular basis. So it's very important to understand these data elements to read through the data. Now look at this. Again, the information is going to be same, where you have the loop, then you have the segment, then you have the data element, field description, length, mapping comments. So all these things are giving you that exactly same pattern what we have understood, what we have learned as part of 835 or as part of 837. There is no change in the data hierarchy. Now what it says, the data necessary for processing 276. Now according to health plan partner, this is the information which is necessary for them to process the information. Now when they say this is necessary, that means, okay, so here is the thing. I was just trying to check out that if there is any additional field. So what we see here is 2100B, 2100C and the 2000D and 2100D. Whatever they have, if you will look at the actual implementation guide, you will find many more. But this is what is coming out to be a required piece of information by this particular payer, which is the health partner plan. So for health partner plan, they only require this piece of information. Your implementation guide may have other data elements, but not necessarily required elements, because you cannot manipulate the required element what you have in the implementation guide. So same, let's look at it. So this defines the length, that how bigger that value could be, 2 of 2, maximum 2. The mapping comments. Now this value which is being 13, transaction set purpose code 13, this value is very specific to health plan. They are making it confirm that if you are submitting the data to us, you have to send 13. No other value will be accepted. That is very specific they have made by putting that value in double quotes in the companion guide. Then you have requesting provider last name or organization name, 1 to 35. Now this value is going to vary by who is the submitter. Based on the submitter, this value is going to vary. Then you have the first name, individual's first name. That means whoever is the rendering provider, or the if it is an organization. So depending upon who it is, you enter the first name. Requesting provider identification code qualifier. See, identification code qualifier, you are going to find it in all the transactions. And what it means, that after this, exactly after identification code qualifier, the next value, what it would be. For example, I'll give you an example to explain this. Let's say this is the member segment. And if you have member identification code qualifier, now the point over here is the following field. Now this have two values, 1 and 2. 1, as I mentioned earlier, each value, which is the predefined value which is coming from the implementation guide, have a definite value, predefined value. That means each value stands for something. For example, let's say if the value was XX and YY. Now XX means that this value is going to be subscriber ID, and YY means this value is going to be the SSN. So if the identification code is submitted as XX, that means automatically system will understand that the following value, which is the actual ID, is going to be the subscriber ID. Whereas if this value is YY, that means the following ID is going to be the member's social security number. This is exactly what is happening over here. They are saying the provider identification has to be XX. That means the following value has to have the NPI only. They are not going to send the tax ID as part of this field. You can look at the actual implementation guide to find out what XX translates to. And you will see that the XX translates to NPI. There could be another value, maybe YY, which will translate to your tax ID. So if there is no specific value provided, that means whatever eligible value the provider can submit, that would be accepted. But if the companion guide is enforcing for NPI by submitting XX, the provider only can submit the NPI, and they have to use this indicator as XX so that the system can understand that the following field is going to have the NPI. Then you have the service provider last name and the organization, or the organization name and the first name. Now this again, if it is an organization, you will have the organization name. If it is an individual, you will have an individual name, first name and the last name. Service provider ID. Health partner provider identification number up to 14-digit alphanumeric. Now this says provider identification number. That means that the provider is issued, how the members are issued the member ID. Similarly, the providers are issued the provider ID. Now the health plan is asking for the provider ID, which is very specific to that particular provider. Now that provider could be a group, or that provider could be a individual. An individual provider, then that ID belongs to an individual provider. If this provider is a group, that the provider ID belongs to that group. That means group of professionals doing practice under one business. The provider ID is issued to that particular business. So then you have the member date of birth, member gender, member last name, first name. Again, these are very specific information to member because you are going to try to match up this member and this provider claim, because you cannot look up the claims without having a valid member and the valid provider data. Once you have that, then you are good to go. And then you have the member ID. Then you have the request trace number. Now this transaction trace number is something which whenever the data gets submitted, the transaction gets generated. So depending upon how they have submitted the data, they are going to have this trace number. Then they have the date of service. The date of service is again, the health partner plan does not say that you have to provide the date of service, whereas seems like this value is an optional value in the implementation guide. That is why the companion guide does not enforce, because in the beginning we saw some of the values are not relevant. If you don't have the date of service, it is going to return just the 90 days of worth data. And then we have 277. Now 277, again, this is the response we are talking about. So when the request is sent using the member date of birth and member first name, last name, and the provider details, then now the payer is sending the response back. Claim status response value is going to be returned with the user requesting and the submitting provider ID number. It will return, the payer is sending it back. Then member name and the date of birth, member ID and the gender, claim status and the date of service, claim number and the EOP codes. Explanation of payment code. Explanation of payment code means if the claim is processed, it will have a reason how the claim is processed. If the payment is reduced, the payment is denied, that is what explanation of payment codes. Whereas if the claim is pending, it will have a reason why the claim is pending in the system. So the explanation of payment has to be there so that the provider can understand what exactly is stopping the claim to move forward. Then they have a billed amount, paid amount, and the check number. Now these values are not necessarily going to be always present, but they are saying these fields are available in the response, means if the claim is paid, that will have the check amount along with the billed amount. Whereas if the claim is not yet paid, you will just see the billed amount. You will not see the paid amount and the check number. Whereas if you have a claim which is paid, you will have a billed amount, paid amount, and the check number associated with that under which the payment is made, along with the explanation of payment reason, which explains why this much of payment is done, why this is the exact as billed amount, or whether the payment is reduced or the payment is rejected. All that reasoning will be provided. Then it says 276 request does not uniquely identify the claim within health partner plan system. The response may include multiple claims that meet the identification parameter supplied by the requester. In the event that the member or the claim are not found in the system, health partner plan will return a 277 transaction set containing a STC segment identifying the element which was not found. So as you see, if there is no result set, no data found, it will just reply back that why no data is found. That means it's kind of an error code. That's what it is. Now, once all these things are done, now let's open this one, because this one we need to understand. This talks about the status code, which is again HIPAA parameters. Why and what code you can use on the HIPAA transactions. It's not like they can randomly just use any code which they want. They have to use very specific codes. And as we see here, these are the codes which can be used. Now see here. You have the status category as one side, and then you have the status code. any HIPAA transactions is only allowed to use these codes. They cannot use their own code. And if they are using their own code, but that is mandatory to have these codes. Similarly for 835, as we discussed that for the 835, we talked about the CARC and the RARC. Similarly for 276 and 277, we have to have these codes. Now this talks about the status category code. Category means whether the claim is accepted, rejected, payment is reduced, what exactly it means. And according to that, you have to give the reason. And this is what is, for example, pending adjudication details. This is a generic message about appended claim. Appended claim is one of for which no remittance advance has been issued. That means since the claim is pending, there is no 835 available at this point of time. So when they are replying back, they have to have all these messages provided. So this is the categorization message. Whereas then again they have to go a little further and detailed out what exactly is the very detailed reason, because some of the messages are very generic. Similar to 835, how you have this claim adjustment reason code. You have the remark code also. So some of the claim adjustment reasons codes are kind of a catch-all situation. And then when you add a remark code, it becomes more specific. For example, the claim adjustment reason code is like service not covered. That is very generic. But when you make it as the procedure code, incorrect procedure code as a remark code, that makes it very specific. That means the procedure code which is submitted is not covered because it is not a relevant procedure code. So that's how the provider will understand that. Similarly, when we talk about the status category and the status code, the category has to list down, which can be little, I would say, high level, and then you detailed out with the more appropriate information as it reads out over here. For example, cannot provide further status electronically. That means it is pointing you to the, okay, make a call to find out more appropriate information. For more detailed information, see remittance advice. That means once the payment will be done, right now the system cannot give you more information because maybe there is nothing to produce at this point of time. So what it is asking is that, okay, wait for the 835 or wait for the explanation of payment to be generated for more information. If there is some letter involved, it will say more detailed information in letter. That means there is a letter which is already being generated and sent out. So provider will wait for the letter. Claims have been adjudicated and is awaiting payment cycle. That means the system have already taken the decision. It's just the payment cycle needs to be completed when the check will go out, or the explanation of payment will go out, explaining the reason what exactly has happened. Balance due for subscriber. There is a member responsibility which needs to be fulfilled. So these are all the messages which are used when we work on the 277 transaction set. So for 277 transaction, which is the response for the claim status inquiry, we have to use these appropriate messages, which are the status category code and the status code, to have this more clear explanation to what has happened. For example, see here, duplicate of a previously processed claim. So this you can do it in case of if the claim is rejected because of the duplicate claim, but provider the final status is still not been posted out to the provider. The provider may come back on the portal and just try to check out the information, and the portal says that, okay, duplicate of a previously processed claim. Now the provider will know that, okay, what will, once he receives the 835 or the final paper version of the explanation of payment, he should not expect any surprises. It should match up with that the claim is being rejected because of the duplicate of a duplicate claim being submitted. So this is exactly how any payer is utilizing the data, and that is what the value of EDI, that no matter which state you are working on, how you are working on, you have to, and if you are utilizing the electronic data interchange transactions, you must abide by the rules which is published on the WPC website under all the EDI messages. You have to follow all these different translations. Now, let's talk little bit about quality assurance analyst and the business analyst here. Talking about a BA or a QA, more necessarily it will be more appropriate for the quality assurance. The reason why, because if you have a data and where you need to create some sample files to see how the data is working, you may not necessarily going to do it for claim status and the response and the request. You may do it as part of your 837 creation. So let's take a case study. You need to create a data by manipulating the existing claim data. So what you do in that case? In that case, you take up the 837 text file from your production. From production, you bring that file to the test environment, the same file what you have it, and then open that file in the XML reader. What it will do is it will open all the data in the XML format where you can see under which node what value is submitted. And then what you do, you manually update that in the XML reader document. You manually update all those documents, and then you save and then close the file. So now what happened? Your data is changed. For example, you change the provider category, provider specialty, you change the procedure code, you change the date of service, you change the number of units, or you change the modifier, you change the patient first name or the last name, you change the provider name, first name and last name, you change the NPI ID, you change the provider ID. So just with the minor tweak doing in the XML, you are able to completely change the file which can be used as a text file for your testing. That is why it's very much important for you to understand these values, what is coming in. So when you open the XML, you know what values you are changing it with what, so that it makes more appropriate test cases for your test case scenarios. And that's how all of the ETL testers are doing it. Now, coming back to, so now we are good with the payment. Now let's see what do they have. Now look at it. This is the best thing. This gives you a sample claim response. Now as you see how the response comes, who is the insured, means the subscriber or the patient, whoever it is, the member ID, the date of birth, provider ID. So when you get a response back, this is something you should expect. Not exactly the look and feel is going to be same because this is just a sample, but this is exactly how you should get the data back as part of 277. Then you have the WebMD trace number. That means WebMD is the one who have requested that. So this is the trace number, because then, so think from the Aetna side, which is your payer side. Now Aetna have contract with Quest, provider office, JFK hospital. Now they all will have their own trace number, so that Aetna knows who is the requester, and that is your trace number, and that is being issued by the payer. Then you have the member ID, date of birth and gender, then who is the provider, full detail, provider information, then who is the submitter. See, your provider and the submitter can be two different agencies. How is that? Because maybe the patient was treated by the Somerset Medical Center, whereas the submitter is the billing office. So maybe MDON is the one who is the submitter, who is submitting it on behalf of Somerset Medical Center. So your submitter could be very different than your provider. Then you have the claim. If there is a claim number, it will list out the claim number. What is the status of the claim? Claim status, effective date, you don't have anything. Total charge amount. it doesn't reflect because it is 0 right now. The payment amount, no payment made yet. Claim statement period, start date and end date. See, this is taking exact 90 days. And why is that? Because there was, when the first screen, if you scroll on the screen which we looked upon, that did not provide any date of service. So the catch over there was that if you did not provide any date of service, this particular software, which is your WebMD, is going to return 90 days of data, whereas the another software may return a different set of data. So that is how it works, and this is exactly how the data is being pulled. Now let's look at the 277 response. This is little bigger than your 276 because we are talking response. Many more things can come. Again, you have the transaction set purpose code, which is they have fixed value as 08. It has to send, they have to send 08. Then they have organization name, again 35 length, provider last name 35, 25 for the first name. Then again they are talking about the provider identification code qualifier. That means when the payer is sending the response back, they must use the proper qualifier and send back the same information what they have received. That means XX and the provider NPI. They should not change that value. Service provider last name, that is same as 276, first name, then the service provider identification qualifier. This is exactly same value what is coming as 276, but since this is very specific to health partner plan, they are making it very confirm that this is the only acceptable value, you can have it in place. Then again some information related to member, for example date of birth, gender, last name, first name. Now bear in mind there are few things to catch here is date expressed in format CCYYMMDD. In case if the date of birth is not in this format, the claim is going to error out because the correct format is not provided. So it's not going to bring back the correct piece of information. So it's very important that the right format is followed for each of the field, and that is one of the requirement of HIPAA implementation. Then they have the trace number. Again, the trace number is tracked for all the issue trace number. Then they have the claim status. You see here, the claim status will come here. Then they have the claim status as 1 to 30. They are providing the specific value. This is just a repetition. They are providing the specific value that okay, if it is 33, that means member not found. If it is 35, claim not found. If it is E0 15340, invalid receiving provider. So they know that if they have received these values, that means this is what the final outcome is. That means these are the error out claims. Explanation of payment codes. This is the status code they are talking about. So they are saying standard status code, which is this value. This is the standard status code. Then they have the check number. If there is a check, the check number will be there. If there is an electronic payment, then the electronic payment details will be here. Then they have the patient account number. Now the patient account number for the physician office, the patient account number is the file number. Whereas the patient account number on the 277 is the claim number, because the insurance company is tracking this particular claim with the help of the claim number. Now this can be customized. Health partner plan says that I need to see the claim number as part of the patient account number. So the WebMD configuration, they are mapping the patient account number with the claim number. Whereas another physician office may say that no, I want to map the patient account, I want to map the patient account number with my personal office patient account number, which is the patient file number. So they can do the mapping. See, these are the configurable things in the software, which everyone have their own way of configuring it. Then they have the reference identification qualifier, which is EA. This is the fixed value they are talking about. Then they have the medical record identification number, which is the medical record number. See, whenever there is a history, there is a medical record number that needs to be provided. If there is one, that needs to be put down. Date of service, again the date of service is same as your date of birth, which has to follow the specific format to make sure that the data is received in a proper format so that the output can be generated with the accurate information. Because for example, think about it. If it is April 5th and you are sending just another way where you are just switching the date with the month and you make it as a 5/4, then it becomes May 4th. So if just by changing the format is going to mess up all your results at what you are trying to look for. So it's very important for any date field, any field where you have to be very specific about format, that EDI enforce you to be in compliant with the HIPAA guideline to follow the exact same format what is required to do that. And that completes the complete 276, 277 transactions for the EDI.